Hello and welcome to the DigitalEDU Dialogues podcast. I'm Angela Britcher, and joining me today is Teege Mettille. He joins us to talk about admissions counselors, the impact that they have on students, and how we can rethink this position. Welcome to the podcast, Teege.
Oh, thank you, Angela. I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Well, I love that you bring such a different perspective than we usually have on the show. You bring experience working in admissions, plus you are also a podcast host, so you are in it when it comes to what's going on in higher education, and you're also the author of the book, The Admissions Counselor Malaise: Addressing the Staff Morale Crisis in College Admissions. And I thought we could start with that, with this morale crisis that we're having in college admissions right now. Explain what's happening and how we got here.
Yeah, absolutely. The short version, right now I have a whole book about it. So, I could give you the extended version, but the short version is admissions counselors are mission-driven folks that are drawn to their position to help students. And for any number of reasons over time, college admissions has evolved to increase the application volume drastically and reduce significantly the amount of time admissions counselors spend with individual students. And while on any given day that might feel fine, in the main, the aggregate is admissions counselors aren't feeling the impact of their work in a way that is affirming and exciting. So without the intrinsic reward, they're left in positions without a lot of extrinsic reward either. The salaries are lower than they can get out in the marketplace. They don't feel good about what they're doing. Sometimes they lose faith in the organization or the institution that they work in, and it snowballs from there. That's the short version.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like the job that they signed up for, the job they thought they were signing up for, is not how it's being operationalized right now. And they're kind of missing the student connections that they thought they were signing up for.
That's exactly right. And part of why, there's a problem with the advertising of the positions, right? In part because admissions leaders haven't necessarily reckoned with how the job has changed, because we didn't mean to change it this way. We didn't mean to do this. But I can tell you this, right? And you work with folks who spend their whole life on college campus as well. We've all seen admissions counselors when they get their job offer, right? They're thrilled, they're excited, and they call someone, right? And they make their first call and they say, maybe it's mom, maybe it's dad, maybe it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, grandma, grandpa, husband, wife, whoever. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're never going to believe it. I just got a job as an admissions counselor. I'm going to get you modestly impact the net tuition revenue for a regional public institution, right? That's not what they say, but that is how they're measured and their focus is driven towards. And that's a misalignment from what they expect on the way in.
Yeah, and one of the things that you share is about your story and your story as a student and in admissions, and how that impacts the work that you do right now and the passion that you have for working with admissions counselors and organizations. If you could tell us a little bit more about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe what you're referring to, Angela, is that I came through as a first generation college student myself, was not, let me be clear, I was not tracked for college in high school. That was nobody's vision. And I fell in love with the school, Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. I love Appleton. I love Lawrence. And I was going through this process on my own. I got the view book. I saw the sticker price and it was like, whoop, that's not for me. And that was the end of it. And I ended up at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater Regional Public, which I loved. I had a fantastic experience. My nephew is there currently. I encouraged my niece to go there as well. Like it's a great option. However, I do think if I had good counseling to understand what the financial aid process was like, maybe I would have found my way to Lawrence differently, or kind of navigated through the process. And so when the time came, I finished my time in college and I had the opportunity to work in admissions at Lawrence University. I jumped at it. And again, what I was excited about was getting to help students who were similarly situated as I was. I was not looking forward to I'm going to get to negotiate financial aid packages with wealthy families. I'm going to modestly impact the ranking systems of US News and World Reports. I was excited to work with students and help them. And, fortunately at Lawrence, that's where I was able to put my focus, and the admissions leadership really drove home that was our role, that was our work. But over time, that has been being downgraded as application volumes increase and tuition revenue pressures accelerate on college campuses.
Yeah, it's become more of a sales position than a student-facing position, is what it sounds like whenever I hear you talk about this. And I want to have you share more about your study. You have spent some quality time studying what is happening in the admissions counseling area and how this led to a tech solution that led to improved morale.
Sure. Yeah, so we did at Enrollment, that's the company I work for. It's an ed tech company. Short version of what we do is we go through a college's admission CRM data with them and help them identify students that are most interested and engaged or ready to engage with the institution. These are the students that the counselors are going to be able to make an impact for. But the time study that we did was I surveyed dozens of enrollment leaders, admissions leaders throughout the country, small schools, large schools, et cetera. And we did it was a qualitative research study. And what we found, I went through all of the things admissions offices do to yield a class. And I asked these admissions leaders, like, how much time do you expect your counselors to be doing this task, right? Throughout the whole year. And it was fascinating. And this is why I say we didn't intend for the job to change this way, because at the end, we then just added up all the time that was calculated of how much counselors were expected to be doing anything. And we found, on average, about 30% of a counselor's time was to be spent on data management, data analysis, queries, entering data in the CRM, cleaning data, pulling exports out. And that was before they talked to a single student, right? That was not including any of the time actually engaged in outreach or what we would think of as recruiting a class. And every time we rolled those numbers up, the admissions leaders were shocked. Sometimes they did not believe it. I had to, on more than one occasion, show the math, right? Like, let's take a look at it. Because we know that the job has become more data focused. We didn't realize how much. And this is the key, we've not changed who we're recruiting to be admissions counselors. We continue to recruit energetic, effervescent, outgoing folks who want to connect with people. And then we're saying, now sit down, spend 30% of your time or more, sometimes it was much more, in spreadsheets, in queries, figure out how to use Excel and learn to love it.
So again, the job changed. We forgot to change the job description. And we're not hiring the people that want to do that kind of work, and instead hiring people that this is kind of soul crushing to spend some time. I'm thinking about, you just described someone like me who loves to work with students, and how sad I would be if I had to spend my day in data. And it leads me to my next question about how using this tool ultimately led to improved morale, and how you saw it start to make some shifts and changes in organizations and with admissions counselors.
Yeah, Angela, the timing is perfect, because just before coming to this conversation, I was meeting with a group of counselors about the tool. I do kind of mini trainings, and this is a flagship public institution. And the counselor said, I've noticed when I'm reaching out to students in the middle, right? That's our terminology, it doesn't matter. The students we've identified as most ready to engage, she said, I've noticed they're more willing to talk to me. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what happens, right? The counselors, they want to have these connections with students, but we're missing the ability to get them there. And you're right, the work is soul crushing if you're not feeling the intrinsic reward. And because, right, when an admissions leader says to counselors, you have to recruit students, they rightly are going to say how. And often it's, you have to do some outreach, or you have to make calls, or whatever the case is. And, phone calls are a hot topic in admissions. But imagine a scenario where an admissions counselor is just randomly given 200 students that they have to call or email throughout the week or send text messages to. And that most of the responses are hang-ups or rude, or saying things like, I've never heard of your college, I don't want to go there. That's part of what is that is demoralizing as well, right? It's not the same soul crushing as spending all of your time in a spreadsheet, but it's part of how you kind of lose faith in your institution. Admissions counselors love the college they are working for, at least when they start. And so to be regularly met with a wall of opposition or objections is depressing. So, what our tool does when we're able to show counselors, here are the students most interested in your institution that are most wanting to talk to you about the institution, it's uplifting, right? Like they are having conversations with students who almost, to put it in faculty speak, that have done the reading before the class, right? That are prepared to have a conversation that is meaningful and impactful, and the counselor can feel good about.
Great. So they're getting to talk to their audience, right?
Yeah.
They're preaching to their choir and getting some real and meaningful conversations instead of just those cold calls that we all know are challenging. And as one who's been on the receiving end of calls from colleges and recruiting, and now I'm very sensitive to the part where I don't respond. I'm like, oh, shoot. I should be kind of like, oh, I'm not looking right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you had shared when you and I spoke before was this idea that we don't have an enrollment crisis, right? Where we keep hearing about the enrollment crisis in higher ed post-COVID. And you say we don't have an enrollment crisis, that we have a college management crisis.
Oh,
and
yes.
I keep hearing this from people that are on the podcast. And talk about what you mean by that.
Yeah, you keep hearing that there's an enrollment crisis?
We keep hearing that there's an enrollment crisis, and then guests come on this podcast and say, no, we're managing our schools wrong. We need to change how we manage.
We need to change how we manage. Yeah.
You have echoed this.
Yes. So here's the thing that I would say. It is true that there are fewer high school seniors than there were 20 years ago. That's for sure. And if someone wants to point to that to say an enrollment crisis, okay, fine, right? Like I'm not, the birth rates did change. But the management crisis that I would point to is this. Colleges and universities take the number of students that they get on their best year, and they expect that to be the minimum for all years going forward. And of course it never will be. There are years when things are just going to hit positively in ways that you can't explain or necessarily replicate. And colleges and universities, if they were managing themselves better, would look at those years and kind of build in a bit of a buffer so that when there's a down year, they don't immediately have to go to cuts. The reason it's so easy to find moments of or articles of institutions doing drastic budget cuts is because every year we are spending every available dollar in service of the mission of the students that are there. And I understand and have been a part of that conversation, to be frank. I get where that drive comes from. Every available dollar should be used to serve the mission. But that is necessarily going to create situations where if enrollment goes down even 2% the next year, and if you're a tuition dependent institution, as almost all of us are, that means you're going to need to find either 2% budget savings or a way to do deficit spending for the year. And that is creating this dynamic where every college is looking for more students every year, right? Every institution is looking to grow enrollment in a way that is just not possible while the demographics are on decline. So I point to it as, when I say it's a management challenge, there's no reason colleges need to operate this way, and we shouldn't. And if we were being smarter and more intentional, we would build a budget based on a more realistic number of students as opposed to an idealistic number of students.
So going back to that idea of budgeting and creating a company, creating an organization that can sustain through that really natural ebbs and flows of doing business, we might even say, and being prepared for those moments when our enrollment is low, meaning tuition is less.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things that you and I had talked about was the difference between customers and students. And my background is marketing communications. I say this all the time. Well, my students are my customers. And you kind of, maybe we should stop treating students as customers. If you could talk more about that.
Yeah, it's, there's a lot of things that colleges can and should learn from the world of business. And there's a lot of things the world of business should learn from colleges and universities, right? But part of what I think has gone wrong is we've come to view students as customers as opposed to students. Those words have different definitions for a reason, right? And here's what I mean. If you think of students as customers, then retention is the institutional prerogative alone. And I think there are times when students, for example, aren't going to be doing the work. And I don't think it's correct to say that the institution then is at fault, right? If students are unable or unwilling or incapable or have other life things happening, there may be times when they need to step out or step off from the enrollment train. Colleges thinking of students as students, right, that are here to learn and need to meet learning objectives to kind of keep going forward. What is a core part of the value proposition? That degree should not just come from time served on the campus, right? And yes, there are things that colleges and universities should do to improve retention and improve learning outcomes. But we need to remember it's not just the university staff that is responsible for it. But if we think of them as customers, right, then we'll say, well, the cheapest customer to retain, or the cheapest customer to get is one you already have, right? It's cheaper to retain a customer. We've heard this about students. It's cheaper to retain a student than recruit a new one. True. But then we necessarily are cheapening the experience by taking the mindset that everybody who starts must finish.
Mm-hmm. And that puts enormous pressure on us as faculty as well, with this pressure to retain instead of how do I teach the whole student and help them make good life decisions.
Yeah, and I don't mean to relieve colleges and universities from their responsibility to improve and maximize retention, right? But it's not just the faculty that need to do it. It's not just a matter of recruit better students, right? There are some students who are fully capable cognitively and emotionally, but life circumstances are getting in the way. And if the expectation is we're going to keep them all, or everybody who leaves is a failure of the institution, I think that's the wrong read. I liken it to, high school diplomas. We expect every student that starts in high school should be able to get a high school diploma. But from being in classrooms, some students are getting to college not being academically prepared, right? And we go back to them like, how did they make it this far? And what we see is, for any number of good and valid reasons, right? There are instances where school districts or high schools are moving students through, even if they haven't done the academic work, even if they aren't ready for the next grade level, because the consequences of not getting a diploma are lifelong and so severe. So the pressure is keep moving them through, even if they're not a high school diploma that is not fully there, if that makes sense. The lack of a high school diploma is so long lasting that we don't want that. Well, if we apply the same logic to a college degree, right, that every student who starts in college should finish in college because they're our customers, and if we fail them, it's on us, not them. I think it creates a scenario where we are churning out paper degrees that aren't always met or matched with the learning that we would expect to come along with those degrees. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, and wanting them to have, wanting it to be a meaningful degree.
Yeah.
And meaningful learning experience with us. And I think that is where it does start with admissions counselors. And I think even in my experiences as an undergraduate a very long time ago, and as a graduate student, it was those meetings with admissions counselors that inspired me to enroll in that institution. And then were also cheering me on at the end. And again, both as a traditional aged undergraduate and as an older and mature graduate student. And so thinking about that role of creating a meaningful learning experience for our students, and that they are ready for that, and that their life experiences can support that in the moment. Talk about some of the solutions that you offer that you think we need to be more focused on when it comes to admissions.
Yes. So there's a couple things. First, colleges and universities at the highest level need to be more realistic about the enrollment numbers that are coming in. I don't know which colleges and universities are listening to me right now, but I'm willing to say it's a safe bet that you are probably not the best kept secret in the country, right? The number of colleges that believe that is implausibly high. And so colleges and universities need to get a much more realistic and down-to-earth assessment of their market position. And if you want to change your market position, that's a long-term prospect, okay? So accept your market position and build an institution accordingly. That's the first thing. College admissions leadership, right, need to find ways to reconnect admissions counselors to the students that they're serving, so that they're managing counselors that are working with students as opposed to processing applications, right? The work of an admissions counselor needs to be about the students, not the application itself. And then colleges and universities, right, like sticking with the customer philosophy, need to come to terms or just accept more readily the idea that some students are going to fail, and that is not just a failure of the institution.
And I think one of the things that as I hear you say that, I think about one of our roles as well is to, re-engage those students at another time, right? That just like we would in business, just because they've stopped out at this point, if we can still provide them with some meaning and with positive experiences, we can re-engage them in the future and try and, help them succeed with their career goals and what they need. All right. Is there anything else that you think is important to share with us today about what's happening with admissions and how we can improve this experience for admissions counselors as well as our students and organizations?
Yes. The final thing I would say is there are a lot of folks that are coming to say admissions counselors, it's a sales position when you really think about it, to which I say, for any institution that really believes that, okay, just have the courage of your convictions and post the next admissions counselor opening you have as a sales representative position. Colleges will not do that for two reasons. We do not want admissions counselors who are actually operating and functioning like a commission-based sales agent, and we don't want to pay admissions counselors what we would pay sales reps. So if that's the case, then we need to make sure we have the position lined up so that admissions counselors are able to counsel and guide students in a way that is affirming and serving the students in the institution at the same time.
Fantastic. Teege, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing this perspective from admissions counseling.
Thank you.
This episode of DigitalEDU Dialogues is brought to you by the BAB Group. The demands for teaching and online learning are constantly evolving. Don't get left behind. Carve out a competitive edge and give students engaging learning experiences with support from the BAB Group's team of course design experts. As experienced online faculty and instructional designers, the BAB Group knows how to craft those aha moments for students and meet outcomes for every modality, online, hybrid, and face-to-face, creating engaging, welcoming, and inclusive learning spaces for students of all ages and abilities has never been more important. Discover how the BAB Group can help you by visiting their website today.